everybody. My name is John Sadowski. I'm the president of Metro Valley Advertising, and welcome to another edition of the Personal Injury Marketing Newsletter. Today, we're talking with Jared Correia of Red Cave Consulting. So, Jared, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us about Red Cave and your role as the founder.
Um, I'm an attorney. I don't practice anymore. I gave up that life about 15 years ago, and since then I've been doing consulting. So basically, what my company does is we provide business management consulting services to lawyers. So, at in a nutshell, it's how do you manage your law firm better, depending on what you want to do. Do you want to have a lifestyle practice? Do you want to make as much money as possible? And we usually help law firms out with anything from growth to technology platform to marketing strategy at a high level. And I work with a bunch of different vendors I like from time to time when lawyers need services that we don't provide. And then, in addition to working with law firms directly, I've also got a number of partnerships with bar associations across the U.S. where we are the official consulting partner with those bars. So that's it in a nutshell, what I do.
Cool. So, what kind of unique challenges do attorneys face that a business management consultant such as yourself can help them address?
Yeah, I guess I kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit. Um, some of the stuff I see on a regular basis, let's start with technology. So, law firms are not sure whether they're using the right technology or the most advanced tools for what they need. And so I can kind of dive in and do like a formal or an informal audit, talk to them about what they're doing, maybe leverage the tools they have better. And that's sometimes an ongoing conversation because sometimes we're tweaking the stuff we built. Sometimes we're looking at adding new software or integrations from time to time. So that's a big one. And then you get some law firms who are still using like desktop products. They've still got a physical server in the office and they want to move off of that. Um, Marketing's another one, just at a high level. Like, what does your marketing strategy look like? What vendors are you using? What are you doing for advertising? What's your marketing plan look like? What are you doing in terms of paid advertising, and how are you figuring out whether that's working for you? We get involved in that at a very high level, but we're not like a digital marketing agency or anything like that. Another one would be issues around growth. Like some law firms want to hire, some law firms want to get their budget under control. Some law firms want to be more profitable. Well, I suppose all law firms want to be more profitable, but we talk to folks about that as well. And that's kind of the big three that we see. And usually there's some kind of law firms come to a consulting business usually because something has happened that's bad, like their server has imploded, or they just had a really bad technology installation, or they made a terrible hire, or their revenue's down, and then we just try to clean things up.
Gotcha. So, some of the things you're talking about sound like, operational efficiencies. What kind of,
Yeah.
things can a consultant like yourself do to help, especially a personal injury firm with those operational efficiencies?
I see like a lot of personal injury firms that don't really have good processes in place. And I'm a big workflow guy.
Hmm.
So if we can get the right technology tools in place, I want to figure out at a granular level how the firm is run. Like, what workflows do we have for the major categories of intake, case management, case closing, administrative workflows within the firm? And then can we measure that in some way?
Hmm.
Like, how quickly are you moving through these processes? How effectively are you getting medical records collected and reviewed? How fast can we move to a demand? What does that look like for different cases? So, if you talked with me for an hour, you would be insanely annoyed because I want to get very deep into this stuff. And I try not to let people off the hook. So I am big into figuring out how the firm runs, documenting that, making that transparent, and then effectively following through on what it is you're doing that you said you would do. Like I try to make law firms more or less turnkey businesses because I think they're more valuable that way, both when the lawyers who are there are running them and potentially as an asset down the road.
Any specific processes or systems you typically recommend for streamlining operations?
Well, I mean, I think I think the first thing is like you want to look at the software you're using.
Hmm.
And I think most law firms should have case management software, so a relational database where they can manage their cases. You want to also have productivity software, so email, document, file management, like Microsoft or Google. You want to have accounting software, and then I think most law firms should also have a CRM, customer relationship management software, which is for
Hmm.
like lead pipeline, marketing automation. To me, those are the big four, and then we dive into that and we figure out what are the viable workflows for law firms. So if I'm a PI firm and my goal is that I want to convert clients as quickly as possible, um, I talk about, like, what are your lead sources, like where are they coming from? Do we have a plan of action for each lead source type?
Hmm.
Can we track whether that was a paid ad or whether that was a personal referral, and can we set up reporting around that? So I try to get law firms to leverage as much of the software they're using as they possibly can. And then I don't believe there's like one size fits all for this stuff. So I really like to get into the weeds and be like, okay, what do you want to achieve here? What does your process look like? How might that differ from another firm's? And then let's build that out step by step. So we want to have all the follow-ups in place. We want to have an endpoint for each process that we use, and we want to build that out in the system, and we want to automate that as much as possible. Especially in a busy personal injury practice, like you don't need to have like a million like salespeople or conversion people working on that. Like you could set up processes so much of this is the rote stuff is managed by technology. Even not even talking about AI, just the basic automation technologies that exist in front of that, and that's kind of what I like to do with
Hmm.
firms. So I guess the answer is different for every business.
Sure. When you talk about making these kinds of changes, it almost sounds like there's a culture change that you're affecting for the law
Yeah,
firm.
yeah, which is hard, man. Like
Yeah.
nobody wants to change. Yeah, I
So
I
how
talk
do
to
you
people and they're
get
like,
get
yeah,
the people to buy in?
right. Well, I think two big things. Well, maybe it's one big thing. Like I want this to be as transparent as possible.
Mm.
I don't like hide the box stuff. I don't want this to be a mystery box. So the more you can involve the whole team in this process, the better. And that includes the lawyers, because I think a lot of time lawyers are like, I don't want to deal with this. This is like below my pay grade or
Mm.
whatever. I just do the cases. But you have to know how this works. You have to have some level of input, because if you don't, you can't complain when it breaks because you weren't involved in the first place. So I try to involve everybody from lawyers all the way down to staff people. You're never going to get full agreement on this stuff, but I feel
Sure.
like if people are invested in the process, they're going to be invested in the business, and then I make it as transparent as possible. So everybody knows what the processes are, everybody knows how they work, everybody gets to see the reports, and everybody's invested in the success of the business. And I think that's the best way to do it. Now, in some cases, that becomes a difficult conversation because, you get Becky, who's been working at the firm for 35 years, and is like, I'm not going to do this. You have a difficult decision to make at that
Mm.
point. Because I think a lot of firms, like attorneys, are like conflict avoidant. Even like really high level like trial attorneys at
Mhm.
a personal injury firm, a lot of them are conflict avoidant when they come to their staff.
Mm.
So a lot of times staff is running law firms and they may not be running it in the best possible way.
Sure.
So I think you need to be able to control that. And if somebody is going to be obdurate or they're not going to want to do the stuff you want them to do, then you have to consider moving on. Sometimes what ends up happening is, like, I'll talk to a law firm, we can't get buy-in from some people, and then we have to remodel the staff a little bit.
Hmm. Okay. That truly is a culture change.
Yeah, that's probably the most severe culture change there is, like
Yeah,
shipping people
no
out the
doubt.
door.
So when you're talking to attorneys about these kinds of changes, do you view it as a from more a cost savings perspective, or the fact that we're more efficient so we can generate more revenue?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the middle there. I
Hmm.
want profitability. So
Okay.
people tell me all the time, like, am I spending too much? I'm like, I don't care what you're spending. I need to know what you're making. So can't just say in a vacuum, I'm spending $1 million and that's too much. Like that might be fine if you're making $10 million, right? If you're making 500,000, it's not so good. So I try to put the focus on profitability, and I try to focus on profitability to the extent I can across the business. So are the attorneys in a vacuum profitable? Are the staff people in a vacuum profitable? Are we using technology to make them profitable? So, I mean, with a lot of the conversations I have with firms, as you might imagine, sometimes I'm telling them to buy new software.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'm telling them to use consultants to help them build out that software. There's a cost to that. But in the long run, I want to move the chains as quickly as I can. So I know people don't like the term factory practice, but like the idea is you want to move through these cases as quickly as you practically can. And that's where you get your most profitability. I think you use the term like getting the case volume up. The
Hmm.
way I look at this is the more productive you can be, the more case volume you have, or the more capacity for case volume you have, and then you have to fill it, the more revenue you make. And to me, I'm in part focused on profitability because there may be an initial spend you have to make that you don't want to make, but that's okay if in the long run it makes you more profitable. So sometimes you have to take a step back to take a couple forward.
Are there particular areas of a practice that lag behind or need the most help in a general sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that most law firms, because I've been harping on it, now I need to follow through, right? Most law firms are very bad about process management. So that has applications across the entire practice. And I would tell you that one of the things that I find that is problematic is that most law firms have a sense of how they move through a case, but they've never written anything down. They've never made it transparent. So the first thing I would say is, yeah, that like I would focus if I was a law firm on how to move cases through quicker, how to move intakes through quicker, and get them to become clients, and that's really helpful. Now,
Hmm.
a spur off of that, which I think is interesting that not a whole lot of people focus on, is I want to know how I'm doing in terms of the practice. Like, am I able to achieve the things that I'm building workflows to do? And that's where reporting comes in.
Hmm.
Some systems are going to have like default reporting, but that may not be super useful to you. So in a lot of cases, I encourage law firms to build out custom reports based on the data that they want. So what I see that's almost non-existent in law firms is management of KPIs effectively, use of data to make decisions. And with the new technologies that are available now, like it's much easier to get access to that information on a recurring basis. You don't have to print out an Excel spreadsheet anymore of a report. You can have a dashboard with information that you find to be viable, and you can pin it wherever you want in your system. So it gets in front of your eyes like every day. So I would say like the main cleanup work I'm doing with a lot of law firms is building the workflows, generating the reporting, looking at the data, and then making changes based on that. But you need to have a baseline in place before you can even do any of those things.
So you mentioned KPIs. So
Yeah.
how do you measure the success, with those reports? What are you looking at that's going to show an attorney that we're moving the needle?
Yeah. Well, this should probably be no surprise given what I've been talking about to this point, but I'm big into process metrics. So this is not, I didn't invent this. This is nothing new, but like I want law firms to use a lean methodology, which essentially means rather than looking at like the case as a whole, I'm looking at the component parts of the case. So for personal injury firms, right? I want to know how quickly can I get a new intake into a consultation meeting with an attorney? How quickly can I get an intake to sign an engagement agreement? How quickly can I gather medical records? How quickly can I build summaries of those medical records? How quickly can I get to a demand letter? How quickly can I get to settlement on that demand letter? And then the same thing for trial. If I go to trial, how can I move as quickly as possible through these different segments? And the idea is if you can track that and that's transparent to everybody, like I talked about before, then you can make changes. So if it's taken us too long to get medical records, okay, what do we do to change that? Do we maybe use a system instead of people? If it's taken us too long to get to demand letter drafting, why is that? Like, what are the what are the issues that we have? What are the speed bumps there? Can we flatten them out? And what I think is great about that is once you put these goals in place, you're putting good pressure on people, and you're going to start to access some gamification advantages because they're going to try to meet their goals. And then the other thing I find, which is kind of I think undercovered here, is if you tell people like, "Hey, we want to achieve these goals, we're not achieving these goals," you'd be surprised at what kind of creative solutions people can come up with on your team. And in most law firms, they're not giving the space to do that. They're looking up at the managing partner and they're like, solve all the problems for us. But if you spread that out, like you'll be able to see that some of the people that you work with who are already intelligent, they're going to make some good choices for you and they're going to help you to move the ball forward. But they need to know where they do that.
Well, you mentioned using technology. How do you incorporate technology? What kind of technology comes in that helps you guys drive that efficiency and cost savings?
Yeah, I think I'd start with the four I mentioned: case management, productivity software, um, accounting, and CRM. And then I would look at the default reports to start with, just to see what you got in place. And then I start thinking about like, what are the metrics I want to employ in my firm? And the simplest way I start with people when I talk about this is, what do you want to achieve that you're not achieving right now? Let's start there. Like, what do you want to improve on? And then let's build metrics around that. And then that's where the custom reporting comes in. Um, and then I would look at in terms of that process on a case by case basis, like, are there tools that could solve problems for me that I'm potentially not utilizing right now? So one example would be, let's say you're an attorney and you got staff people popping into your office all the time asking you a million questions. And you're like, gee, I'm spending like 40 minutes a day just answering questions. Well, maybe you look at something like Slack or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams at that point. So you can have the ability to have people ask you questions, but you can answer it on your own time and not be interrupted constantly. Maybe you're generating the same type of demand letter over and over and over again. So maybe you look at document assembly software. Like, could I pull data from certain fields? Could I make logic changes to this document? And does a human have to be involved in that or not? Um, just those two examples, like that's going to save you a ton of time, allow you to increase your case volume, and move your practice forward in a better way than you're probably doing right now.
You mentioned case management software and
Yeah.
CRMs.
Yeah.
Are both of them necessary, or can you get away with just, let's say, case management software?
Oh, would that you could, right? I'm trying to save people money too, but I really think you need both. I think it's a different structure, especially in legal when you've got all these ethics rules surrounding, like, okay, what's the client? What's the lead? I want a client management software that's separate from a lead management software. I want, with the leads, I want to have a software where I can get to the point where somebody pops in and I convert them as quickly as possible to a client. And then the case management side of it, that's how I run the case and move that forward. I think they're two fundamentally different software tools, and I would want to have both in my system. Now, there are some products that try to combine that, some more successfully than others. So you could look at that, a single use product for that. But you want to make sure you have a full boat of CRM features, that pipeline, that reporting, marketing automation features, and then you want to have a full set of law practice management software features, which is workflows, potentially client portals, financial management features for tracking expenses and things like that, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. So basically, the lead will come in through the CRM. You'll nurture it there, and then when it becomes a case, it gets kicked into the case management software.
Right. So the way I kind of look at it, what I tell people is like, you want to have them sign an engagement agreement, and then that's the trigger to get them into the case management software.
Right.
Once they have that agreement, once they become a client, you shift them over. What's cool is that even if those softwares aren't connected, like I said before, even if you can't get a single use tool that does both those things, because that can get expensive, um, it's easier than ever to integrate these cloud based softwares. So, what's cool is that all that data that you collected in the CRM side will populate the new matter in your case management system. So, it's not like you have the thing like you did previously, pre cloud, where somebody's got to take that information and type it in manually, which is a massive drag on your time and efficiency.
So you've obviously been doing this a while. Any success stories or case studies that you can share with us where you've kind of significantly impacted a personal injury firm?
Oh, sure. I was just talking about this. I was doing a CLE before we did this podcast, and I mentioned this. I had a firm that was having trouble getting demand letters out. And I talked about all these different KPIs you can use, but this is sometimes really simple. So I said, all right, the new KPI for your firm is you're going to get a demand letter out every week, no matter what. I don't care. No excuses, right? And so this firm just starts cranking out demand letters. And we started this at the beginning of the year. And in December of that year, I want to say it was like 2022 or something like that, they made more money in the month of December than they had ever made in any prior year of practice because they got their pipeline unstuck. And that was a really simple thing. And now I think they're up to 3 demand letters a week. But that's a
Wow.
KPI they use constantly. And sometimes they'll still message me and they'll be like, hey, it's Friday night. Wanted to let you know that we got our demands out. That kind of thing is great. And then, like I mentioned before, the process metric stuff is really helpful for firms. If I can dive in with a firm and say, okay, let's look at the time it takes to run through each segment of this representation. What's taking too long? Let's introduce that to the staff and try to find a way to fix that. That can be really helpful too. So the more data you have, the better choices you can make about this thing. And I've done some crazy stuff with like KPIs, and one example is, but there's this baseball statistic called WAR, which is wins over replacement. So basically, the way that works is you take like an average performing player and you compare the instant player you're looking at to that person to see how much better they are. So somebody like Shohei Ohtani, who's a really good baseball player, he's got like a 20 WAR, right? So having him in the outfield, you get 20 more wins than you would with an average player. So some law firms we've looked at, okay, what's an average performing associate look like? And who's better than that and how much better are they than that? This is a way of judging the quality of the attorneys you have. We've
Mm,
applied like the baseball WAR to legal practice. So I think you can get really creative here in terms of managing this stuff. And it has a real impact on your business because this is not qualitative like everything else is. So in a lot of law firms, somebody will say, I don't like the way you're working, and the person you're talking to, an associate attorney, might be like, well, I do. And then nobody's got any way to compare what's actually happening. But if you use data, like it can really propel the firm forward. So those are just some examples, but there are others over the course of time. Like I said, I don't try to do cookie cutter stuff.
mm,
Like I try to take law firms where they are and say, okay, let's build something that works for you, both in terms of process, analytics, et cetera.
interesting. Okay. So, what advice would you give to a personal injury firm that's looking to hire a management consultant?
Consultants, like they'll get kickbacks from technology companies that they work with. So if I recommend a certain technology firm, I'll get paid for that. Um, I never do that, and I think consultants should be agnostic in terms of the tools they recommend. So I would want to know about the professional independence of the person you're working with. Um, I would probably also ask, how many firms they've worked with before, what types of firms, because that gives you a sense of whether or not they'd be able to work with you effectively. And then I mean, I have a bias about this, but I don't necessarily want somebody who's going to try to just sell me a system that they sell to every other law firm. I would want to know how deep they would get into my practice and what would be the result of that. So that's the other thing I'm looking at. At what depth do they involve themselves? And are they just selling you cookie cutter solutions or trying to build out something for your practice that's really effective?
Cool. So, what's the future hold for Red Cave Consulting?
Well,
Any new
nothing that I can talk
services
about right
or
now. No.
initiatives you're excited about?
I got some stuff cooking, some stuff I can't talk about yet, but I guess like what I'm going to continue to do is working with law firms directly, trying to build out additional bar partnerships, and just thinking of ways to serve lawyers that are useful for them. Like we do consulting on a subscription basis, but we've also got some audits that we do, and so I'm always trying to look the offering, and I try to stay really current with technology solutions so I can deliver better service to lawyers. But yeah, I mean, it's funny when people ask me stuff like that. I'm like, I've kind of been doing the same type of stuff for like 15 years, and I'm going to do the same type of stuff moving forward. The names change, but the process remains the same.
There you go. Nice. Super. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I certainly found this interesting and educational, and I hope everyone else does as well. If you could quickly, give us your URL, your contact phone number, then
Oh,
afterwards
sure.
I'll put it up on the screen so that everyone can see it and copy it.
Oh yeah. Consulting websites redcavelegal.com, REDCAVE legal.com. And phone number is 617-398-7181.
Super. All right, Jared.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I had a blast. Thank you.
Good. Good. Then we'll have you back soon.
Great.
All righty. See ya.